You caught me in the middle of a few things. I'm gonna need some 30-weight ball bearings and some gauze pads. It's all ball bearings these days. So, I am in the middle. I'm monitoring something. I've got to do a podcast interview here coming up in a few minutes. I'm being interviewed, not the other way around, so that's kind of a novelty. Super easy for me to do that. As you know, I can ramble with the best of them. This is a Q&A. I've got a picture package film I'm working on, which will eventually come out. Also, something dangerous happened this weekend. I got out for an overnight in the van north of here. There may have been some still photography. There may have been some motion photography. There may have been some campfire construction. There may have been some hiking. There may have been some Orvis 8-foot Marbury dry fly action. There may have been some strikes. There may have been some fish that I lost. I'm not verifying. I'm not confirming. I am doing what a good American does at this point in time. Hedge my bets right down the middle. I am about to apply some bee-balm to my trusty Beyond gloves. They kind of still smell like bee-balm. By the way, this stuff is fantastic. You can put it on your hands, and I probably look like a billboard now. I lost my other hat, so I'm slowly cycling through these hats that I've had now for years and never worn. And no sponsorship from this company at all, but I do love these gloves, and I love this bee-balm, and man, does it smell. It smells better than I do, which is always why I leave it in my duffel bag, because my duffel bag can get musky. Let's just put it mildly. So I've got a ton of Q&A questions here. I have 3 pages of them that I'm definitely not going to get through, and I haven't even added to these pages all of the questions that have come in recently. So there's plenty of stuff out there, and I've got my trusty journal. Have I ever talked about the Uniball Jetstream Sport in black? I'm not sure I've mentioned that before. In case I haven't, it's my preferred writing instrument, and I'm just working on an EDC top-down film of this pen right now. It's only about 90 minutes long, and it's just panning, slow-motion, lit filmage of this pen with a blue gel in the background for no apparent reason. I could get interrupted here too. There could be someone coming to drill a hole in the wall. My wife could come out. I don't know. So I've been rambling long enough. Let's get to these questions. I'm one person with one opinion. I think some of my opinions rankle some people in the whole photography space. That's probably a good thing. I think rankling is good. We all need to be rankled. Like the burn that we used to give our younger siblings. Grab their arm and twist. Remember that? I was always the younger sibling, so my arms were constantly getting that as a child, which is why I'm so traumatized now. Question number 1. I think this is from Sean. My old buddy Sean, who I've never actually met in person because he lives in some third world backwater called Japan. He's asking me about my hiking setup for when I'm on a long, like an actual hike, not screwing around 10 minutes from the car, but an actual hike. Like 10 minutes from the car, all I'm doing is breaking stuff and graffitiing everything in sight. Once I get past 10 minutes from the car, I leave the spray paint, I leave the crowbar, I stop breaking things, and I go on like legitimate hikes. My hiking setup most of the time, and it's ironic that you asked this now because if you saw what was behind these 2 doors in the other room, I have all of my Atlas packs out on the floor. I have all of my Tenba bags out on the floor, and I am transferring everything from every different bag and every different angle because I got out last weekend, like I said, and it planted the seed. All it took was a half a day. Building a campfire, fly casting, making a couple of pictures, and it's all I can think about doing is getting out of this house, getting away from the computer, shucking my responsibility, and going into the field. Normally when I do a hike, I'm carrying my phone and an action camera. That's it. Now, that's gonna change. If I go back out this coming weekend, I will have an Atlas backpack, and I'm not recommending this to anyone, but I have a very short amount of time to capture a completely wide range of stuff which means nothing will be done at high quality level. It will be the Toyota Camry of coverage. It's okay, it's reliable, but it's not sexy. You don't want to tell your friends you're driving it, and you're not going to get many dates in this car or with my coverage. But so I will have, in my Atlas pack, I will not only have my food and my rain gear, which is important now because we have not only rain, but we got snow and sleet. And it will have food. It will have a 7-piece collapsible fly rod from Orvis, which I've had for years. It will have a Orvis fly casting reel, which I've had for years. It will have 2 small fly boxes. It'll have all my little scissors and hook removers and all this kind of stuff in there. And I will have a XT2 Fuji with a 70 to 200, which is their 50 to 140 2.8 with a 2X converter. I will probably take the short, wide zoom that's stabilized with a neutral density filter on the front, so if I need to do wide filming. And what else do I have in there? My audio recorder, GoPro, yes. That's about it. Normally, if it's hike, it's action cam and cell phone. But I'm going to start carrying a still camera again because, like, there were a couple of images from last weekend that I was like, I'm not a landscape guy. I don't look at landscape photography. I don't particularly like landscape photography. I give all the credit in the world to people who are full-time landscape photographers because landscape is one of those things when you're standing at the base of whatever it is, Santa Fe Baldy, and there's a snowstorm coming in and the peak is lit with that late afternoon red alpenglow at the top and there's snow flurries in the foreground. Yes, you can make images of that, but replicating what it feels like to stand there doesn't happen for me. I've never seen a landscape photographer who's able to replicate that feeling. Where I think landscape photography, and I know no one asked me this, but I'm going to go ahead and share it. I think where it works is for a lot of people who are not able to get out into these places, and that is a lot of people in the world. And I think that's why landscape photography is so popular. I'll give you another example now that you've asked. My wife was having a jewelry sale at another city here in New Mexico a couple of weeks ago, and I was walking through the fair, and it was outdoors, really cool, much better than it was last year, great weather, great vendors, and I came across a person selling photographs in a booth. We all know this person. It's every street fair you go to, there's at least one person, typically male, who is selling photography prints from either the little holder where you can flip through them, and then there's 3 or 4 on the wall behind them. And to say this was average photography was an understatement of epic proportion. The images were at a level where they froze me in my tracks, not because I said, wow, how did he make that? It was like, it froze me in my tracks because I said, why did he make that? And then why did he print it? And why would he try to sell that? And oh my God, some woman just walked up and bought 4 pieces of this. I was completely mesmerized. So my advice from a couple of weeks ago where I said to sell prints and don't worry about doing stock, I feel validated. I think that that's a great thing. I studied the people who were buying. I was like instant anthropologist. Where are you from? Why is that image making any kind of sense to you at all? Are you incredibly wealthy and you're like Jim Carrey, like, flipping bills out? That's $72,000. That's an IOU, sir. That's as good as money. You might want to keep that one. I couldn't believe it. So I'm not a landscape guy, but there are moments when I'm in the field where I think, you know what, that's a decent frame that I could use at some point. It could be a page that I pull back the opacity and use it as copy over it or whatever. And plus, I need to practice as a still photographer. I suck right now. I mean, I really do. I suck. I can help you be a better photographer. That I can still do. Me going out and like putting my neck on the line to make really good work, I don't know. I don't do it enough anymore, and I'm really jonesing. So hiking setup, back to question 1. That was question 1, by the way. Typically, action cam. I have a GoPro 6. I thought it was a 9. They just came out with the 11. And so I was looking at my GoPro like, oh, I have a 9. It's not that old. And then I went, oh, it's a 6. No wonder the batteries are swollen and the thing turns itself on and off. This whole weekend, I had it strapped to my head, and it just kept turning itself on at random times. And so when I came to edit the footage, I was like, I don't remember shooting that. Like, why did I film that? And then it was one of those after another, and I thought maybe it's time to upgrade. So maybe I get a GoPro. My 360 camera is okay. I find those a little gimmicky. After having used it now for a year and a half, it's pretty gimmicky, the 360 cameras. And I think if you're 12 and you watch YouTube films all day and you play video games all day, the 360 camera is great. But if you're an adult who maybe reads, let's say, 2 books a year, you want to destroy all the 360 footage. I sort of equate it with drone footage. Like I said, I've said this before, if I go to a YouTube film and it starts with drone footage, I immediately sign off. 99.9% of all drone footage I see is meaningless and useless and does not add to the narrative. It's only in there for like eye candy, and most of these folks don't know how to tell a story, so they are compensating by 360 cam drone footage. That was question number 1. Question number 2, oh boy, okie dokie. You might want to strap in for this one because I can feel the hate coming off of this. It's going to heat me up, friends. Someone asked me about iPhone photography. I have nothing against iPhone photography. I don't typically do it myself because I don't like to shoot like this. I like to shoot like this. I like a viewfinder. I like a real camera, and I mean real not in a superior way, but classic. I like classic cameras. I like the feel of them. I like the viewfinder. I like a camera that has a little heft to it, that feels solid. I feel connected to the scene far more than I do with this. I use this all the time, but it's for little looky-loo things. It's for a YouTube short. It's for a Twitter thing. It's for all of the book posts that I do on my site where I talk about the books that I read and I show you the cover of the book. That's all done with the mobile phone. But I would not go into the field specifically to shoot with a mobile phone. And here's my thoughts about that. If that's what you do, great. If that's what gets you into the field to shoot, great. I've had students in Latin America, I've had students in other parts of the world that only shot with an iPhone and they killed it because they don't look intimidating. They were people that could walk into a scene. Every single person in the scene has a mobile phone, so everybody's guard is down. When they're walking in and shooting, nobody seems to pay much attention. But there's also the subset of people who are still selling this concept that I'm an iPhone photographer, and they're leading with the piece of technology. If you went to those same people and said, I'm a Fuji X-T2 photographer, all I shoot is a Fuji X-T2, it's X-T2, it's X-T2, those same people would look at you and say, why are you talking about what camera it is you're using? But yet they, at the same time, harp on, I'm an iPhone photographer, I'm an iPhone photographer. And for those folks out there, let me just be the first to tell you, if no one has said so far, ooh, bird hit the window. Not good. Probably we got a body outside. Stop doing that. Because Robert Clark did a cell phone book in 1997 with Sony Ericsson. I think it was Robert Clark. That's it. He blew the bell curve for all of you. If you're still hyping the fact that you're only using a mobile phone, you're missing the point. It's not novel anymore. There's nothing interesting about that. There's nothing commendable about that. There's nothing interesting about that entire narrative. So just stop and start focusing on your imagery, because I don't care what you're using. If you're a Nikon Z9, see how I use the Euro Z there? I didn't say Z. I would never say Z. It's so pedestrian. I would say Z. And Nikon, with a slight British accent, Nikon instead of Nikon here, like the Luddites here in America, what we call it. Stupido, tonto. Anyway, so I use the iPhone as a kind of a strategic tool, but it's not something I want to go out and do a project with. There is also a laziness element to some of the folks who are out there beating the drum of iPhone photography. I get it. There are times where I look down at the bag and I go, I don't want to carry that. And they just have a phone in their pocket. You got to admit it, though, when that's part of the equation is like, I don't want to carry anything else. And the cell phone, works pretty well, and like clients don't care. And agencies have been accepting iPhone images for years. Not all of the agencies. Some of the better agencies would not accept iPhone photos for a long, long, long time because they were kind of crappy. Now they're good, and all the good agencies are gone, so it balanced out. The crap rose to the top, as it has a tendency to do in the photography industry. So if you're using an iPhone, knock yourself out, people. I'm happy for you as long as you're out making stuff. That's all that matters. By the way, if you are an iPhone photographer, print those images. There is no reason not to print them. They print incredibly well. Yes, you have to tweak the files. Every digital file you should assume it's a negative. It's like having a negative. Negatives in the darkroom, you apply filters, you change up your processing, your development, all these different things. to give contrast and grain and saturation and all those things. Digital files have to be tweaked to really maximize their potential. I should know I am a digital imaging expert if you have not heard. It's kind of my specialty. Archiving technology in general, I'm very good at it. I mean, kind of a savant, not to blow my own horn. Okay, question number 3. 90 minutes in, we get to question 3. Someone asked me about birding and of all animals, why I chose birds instead of something else. And there's a pretty easy answer to that. Birds are everywhere. They are literally everywhere. It's very rare I get into a situation anywhere in the world where I don't have a bevy of birds to choose from. For example, had I chosen the Mexican gray wolf and I'm in Albania, that's going to be pretty hard to spot those damn things. They might be there. They could be on the streets of Tirana for all I know. But they're going to be hard to find. I could say, elk. If I'm on the streets of St. Louis, Missouri, am I going to find some elk? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe there's an elk farm where people are harvesting the meat just to drive the vegans crazy. It's possible. But birds are everywhere. I also knew next to nothing about birds when I started this. So this weekend when I got up north, it's pretty interesting. About 2 hours north of here, there is a delineation that is transparent, but it is a very distinct delineation between wildlife south of that line and wildlife north of that line. For example, magpies. Once you cross that delineation, magpies are all over the place, and hawks are all over the place because you have the beginning of the prairie dog range, like the southern end of the American prairie dog range. And those hawks are just feeding all day long on those fat, little, furry, cute things that get ripped apart with incredible precision by these hawks. And then the magpies probably eat the scraps. So those two are in cahoots. They're criminals. It's a criminal syndicate that those two birds have put together. When I was in Maine all summer, looking at the birds they have on the East Coast, very different from what we have here. Birding to me is great because it is a perpetual education about yet another topic I know nothing about. The list of topics I know about is this big, and the list of topics in the world I don't know about is so far off the scale, you can't even see it. You couldn't see the top with binoculars. And so that's one of the reasons why I read all the time, and I do things like birding, is because I am a complete dumbass, and I'm trying to tip the scales back in my favor any way I can. So that was number 3. Of course, they were numbered 27, 28, and 29 on my sheet. So now I'm going to go back to the first part here and really confuse myself. Whew! I blew a snot rocket earlier on my motorcycle, so I got a little seepage, a little runnage happening. Question number 4. Would you ever recommend doing an internship at Kodak for someone who wanted to pursue or learn more about film? Not looking for a career change since I'm working camera operator already, but would it be better than taking a university course or taking a workshop? It would be better than taking, my guess is, a university course, because university courses are slow. They're scattered out over several months, and you may meet once a week or once every 2 weeks. If you are diehard and rabid to learn something, the college atmosphere can be relatively slow. That's why you have to diversify and take a whole bunch of different classes at the same time. A film workshop could be fantastic because workshops are intensive. An internship at Kodak, I don't know if they offer them. I worked for Kodak Professional for 4 years, and I certainly got an education on film. I got a forced education on film. But Uncle Dano here played a little trick on the Great Yellow Father. I was flown to Rochester. The position I had at Kodak came with a 18-month training period, 5 days a week, 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock at night. You went to Rochester. You stayed in some snazzy rundown apartment complex from 1985 with orange shag carpet, and they beat photography into your head with a blunt object. And I lasted 3 days. And they got so frustrated with me, they said, "You nitwit, why don't you just go back to California and we'll figure something out." Now, I had a master plan in mind before this whole thing went down, and I certainly did not want to spend 18 months in Rochester, New York, especially in the middle of the winter. So I flew back to California and I said, I've got a novel idea. How about we create a new position where I don't have any responsibilities at the labs and any responsibilities at the dealers, because I don't know what to do with those guys. And I know your lab people and your dealer people, they don't want to deal with photographers, and guess what? I do. So I'll take everybody's photographers and you can take my labs and my dealers and we'll call it even. And they did. And it worked out really well. The lab and dealer people said, I don't want to deal with photographers. They're maniacs. And I said, yeah, I know, but I'm one and I kind of can understand the mania. And so I'll take them from you. And, I would go into these photo labs with my testing kit and I would pull up in my black Pontiac Grand Prix company car, which was a beast and a sexy machine any way you look at it. And I would stand in the parking lot of these professional labs with the instruction manual for the testing kit. I had no idea what I was doing, none. And the guys in the lab would look at me and they would go, Dano, we love you, buddy. You're not touching our line. So take your test kit and your idiotic Kodak golf shirt and get back in the car and drive away. Or we'll take you to lunch and call it even and you don't have to test and we'll tell you that the line is where it should be. And I'd be like, great. So it worked out really well. If Kodak offers an internship, and frankly, they should, because I've heard rumors that Kodak is going to create more coating alleys for film because of the popularity and rise of film. Maybe it'll help with film prices. I don't know. I don't know if they're going to actually follow through with the coating alleys, but it would be great. And why not reach out to Kodak and pitch it to them? Why not? What I see still coming out of Kodak, especially their social media stuff, it's not so good. It's not great. They're like a lot of other modern companies. They sponsor people that you think to yourself, why on earth are they sponsoring this person? Like, there's a lot of really good film photographers out there. There are. Fantastic. Pretty much in all genres, although they're dwindling. On the professional side, they've been dwindling for decades, but it's really at critical mass now. There's a few folks. Fine art world still has a fair number of film shooters, but a lot of the other genres are going away. But still, there's enough people out there that you could do some really great stuff. Pitch it and come back to me with a full report. Number 5, website hosting. Who would you recommend? Wix, SmugMug, Squarespace, the latest 39 websites for photographers that come up on a DuckDuckGo search. I don't know what DuckDuckGo is. Did I mention how good I am at technology? I use WordPress, and I really like it. And thanks to Fleming and Charlene, who are the folks that helped me with my website, we sort of navigated mine over to a professional level of WordPress. There are some aspects of it that I can do myself, and occasionally I have to reach out to them and say, save me. But I think if Fleming and Charlene, let's say that they won the lottery and moved to Bora Bora and they wouldn't talk to me anymore, then I could probably manage the WordPress thing on my own. I could probably figure it out because I am so good at technology and I'm so forward thinking. It's scary. Most people look puny next to me. They look like Benjamin Button when they're next to me. But I think it's really whatever is simple and clean, and typically an interface, you're going to jive with one of them over the other. Squarespace sponsors every single online photographer thing out there. I think every time I see something, I see Squarespace that's associated with it. I think their sites are visually beautiful. I don't know how they work in terms of e-commerce or things like that, but you can also integrate those with other e-commerce applications on the outside. So pretty much everything is good now. That's the beauty of being a photographer today. The tools that we have, whether it's self-publishing and you want to create a zine or you want to do an offset run of books by yourself, the technology is out there and it's affordable and it's right there for everyone. So take your pick, man, or do them both. Do 2, use an assumed name on one, and then be 100% truthful on that site. And then do a business one where you have to create a facade, a modern facade of like, my life's rainbows and unicorns and I'm blessed, and you put all the same crap that everyone else puts out, and then see which one does better. That could be kind of fun. All right, number 6 or 11, depending on what list you're looking at. Okay, and I did not read through these at all. I am completely unprepared. I've spent some time looking at simple websites such as Platon, or more elaborate and gritty websites like Estevan Oriol, and like them both. Actually spent a lot of time looking at everyone's website and like things about most of them. I've also seen that many people don't have an attention span of more than 25 to 40 images when I share my IG. What makes a pro photo industry website stand out to you? Is it the stories that keep people coming back, or is it the get the point website, sales, bookings, portfolio, or more of a YouTube following? I never look at YouTube following for any reason whatsoever. It has no relevance on whether someone is a good creator or not. YouTube is about following. Social is about following and about reach. two entirely different things. Most of the best photography YouTube channels that I know of are not run by photographers. They're run by people who love the nuts and bolts and naughty bits of photography, and they understand how to build following by cooking a perpetual stream of fast food that works for the broadest possible audience. That is how YouTube works. YouTube is not about saying, I'm going to make the best quality thing that is meaningful to me. That is a great way to never get a following. For example, YouTube Short monetized, 300 views. YouTube Short non-monetized, 8,000 views in the same period of time. Why do you think that is? So I like websites, and by the way, Platon, very interesting guy. I was at a festival a few years ago where he was there, gave a talk, showed work. Seemed like a really cool guy. He's been good for a long time. Somebody that you should study, that you should know about. Douglas Kirkland died last week, and I told someone this the other day. The talk in the professional industry that has dominated behind-the-scenes talk this entire last 10 days in the professional field is the death of Douglas Kirkland. I don't know how many online photographers even know who the guy was or why he was so different and why he was so unique and how his history is just flat out incredible, not to mention the single nicest photographer I've ever met in my life. There will never be another guy like this. He simply was beyond anything that the industry could fathom creating today. To have a standing assignment, a standing monthly assignment from Eastman Kodak for 40 years. He shot 8x10, he shot digital, he shot Marilyn Monroe, he did everything everywhere, and he was 88 years old, I believe, when he passed away, and he was shooting right up to the last minute. The guy was fantastic. Esteban Oriol, I knew when he was just starting out. I was working for Kodak Professional in Los Angeles. I had a little section of the freezer at Kodak Hollywood, which is where the motion picture division kept all their reserves of film for motion picture. So it was a giant freezer complex. And the guys in the freezer complex, the guys that ran the forklifts, took a liking to me and said, dude, if you need a place to store your film or excess stuff, we'll give you a little cubby in the back and you can store it in there. And I did. And it was also very close to the offices of Flaunt Magazine. And Flaunt Magazine at the time was completely unique. It was so novel in terms of who they were publishing, how they were publishing, the materials they used in their magazine. I knew the publisher and the founder of Flaunt Magazine, and I knew a lot of the photographers that he was assigning. And Esteban was new to me, but his work immediately was like the most raw work and had the closest, most personal relationship to his subject matter of any other photographer that I knew at that point. And I think now he's just exploded. I think he's exponentially beyond where he was then. And I have not seen his work for a long time, only because I haven't looked for it. Like a lot of other people, I'm busy doing other things. My guess is he's probably doing motion. He's probably doing commercial and advertising as well as his doc stuff. He was like destined to shoot up. So websites to me are simple, personal, honest, truthful. I love a little behind the scenes / blog component. I want to know more about the person. I want to know about their process. I'm going to make a decision on the work very quickly, which is also what most editors, agents, art buyers are going to do. They're going to know within the first 10 frames if this person has a distinctive look. Do they know what they're doing? Are they consistent? Can they produce good work over multiple bodies of work? Or did they get lucky one time and produce one amazing body of work and then nothing else? That's kind of what people are looking for. I want story. There's a million people out there, that can make good images. Every portfolio review you go to, all the reviewers can make good images, and the vast majority of attendees can make good images. That's not what's interesting to me anymore. It's about story, purpose, meaning, direction, drive. Who are you? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? Do you understand what the context is? Do you know your history? I just saw somebody else ripping off a famous photographer from the 70s. And I saw it coming from a mile away. I said, you a-hole, you better admit who you're ripping off. Never did. Because that person knows their following doesn't know the original photographer. That is just blasphemy, and it happens all the time now because that's just the world we live in. So simple, clean, easy, personal, and throw some story in. Where are we now? Number 7. This is a good one. Short and simple. My girlfriend wants to go on a safari. Have you ever been on one? Define safari. Oh, I've had some safaris in my life. Never in Africa. The Cult just dropped a new album. My brother texted me and said, "Have you heard the new Cult album?" And I said, "No." And then he said, "I'm going to text you back in an hour because I'm going to the gym, and after I play it through a couple of times at the gym, I'm going to let you know." And my brother texted me and said, "It's awesome." My brother and I, going back to the 80s, we went on safari to the Cult concert. We went on safari to Guns N' Roses, and there was danger. There were enormous animals trying to do us harm. And I feel lucky to have survived it. But I have never been to Africa on safari. I'm not a crowd guy. So if there was a way to do this where no one else was there, I would probably do it. Or if I was going out with like an anti-poaching squad, or I was by myself with a group of local people. But I don't want to be in a caravan of SUVs with 50 photographers all shooting that. I just don't want to do that. I'm not that guy. I'm not that easy, people. Number 8, Lyme disease. Hey, this looking up, isn't it? We're on all the positive things. Lyme disease. I never thought about ticks until I saw you talking about it. Living in Vegas, there are so many other elements to worry about, from the heat to cougars to snakes and getting stuck by a cactus. True. I often wear gaiters when I'm out in the wild here or elsewhere hiking. They feel like they offer adequate protection. I never spray, but now I'm wondering if it should be another part of the outdoor arsenal. What happened in your situation, and would you be willing to share your story? Yes, and it's also on my site. So if you go to shifter.media, my Lyme story is on there. I believe it's still on there. It sucks. That's all you have to know about Lyme disease. It sucks. You don't want it. It's the fastest growing vector-borne disease in the world. It is a full-on, full-blown epidemic, pandemic, whatever you want to call it, and it is an absolute, how do I put this? It is a scam of what's happening in America, because the insurance companies and the American Medical Association and the Park Service have worked in cahoots together for decades to quell how bad this situation is. I just spent the summer in Maine. Everyone either has a family member, a relative, a friend, a neighbor who has Lyme. Everyone. It is rampant. It is epidemic. It is so far beyond what you're hearing in the news. It is so far beyond what the CDC claims on their website, which is outdated information that they've had since the 1970s. It's all BS. You also had the state of Maine release 86 yearling moose calves, and 6 months later, 76 of them were dead from ticks. I spoke to 2 moose hunters in Maine, both of which said driving into the moose camp to do their hunt, there were dead moose lying on the road, killed from ticks. And once they both bagged, each of them bagged a moose, the first thing they have to do is winch it onto a trailer, drive to a processing facility, and the processing facility tests the meat to make sure that it is safe to eat because of all the ticks. The winter is not winter anymore. It is not killing off these ticks. You now have things like the Lone Star tick in the state of Maine, which is a tick that inhibits your body's ability to process protein. So anytime you ingest protein, it can make you sick. You have Rocky Mountain spotted fever. You have Powassan. You have all kinds of vector-borne, tick-borne illnesses. There are numerous, dozens and dozens of these, many of which do not have a cure or a protocol. And the government, frankly, flat out, is lying about the severity of this outbreak, and they have since the 1970s. There are a lot of reasons behind that, and I will leave that to you to investigate. I never had a recognizable tick bite. I did not see a tick bite. I did not have a bullseye rash. I had no idea what it was. I just started to feel off in a major, major, major way. I was sick for 5 years. I was acutely sick for 2.5. I was mostly sick for 2.5 before I slowly started to come out of it. It is a nightmare. One of the people that I spent time with in Maine has had it for 30 years. She said some mornings, she's a very successful person. She said some mornings she gets up, she's so cognitively impaired, she cannot write, she can't type, she can't look at paperwork. The next day, cognitively, she's fine, but she has so much joint pain she can't go up and down the stairs. The next day, she's fine. And then 3 days later, it's one or the other that comes back, and she's been dealing with it for 30 years. A lot of people commit suicide. I understand why. I called Lyme disease my shadow because if I was awake, I was dealing with it. It is absolutely unnerving to have this. And again, if you are lucky enough to get a tick bite, see a bullseye rash, and find a doctor who will provide treatment immediately, you can often get over Lyme disease. Even though there's no cure, you can become asymptomatic. There's tons of people out there who have this experience. But you still have people finding difficulty getting treatment. Even in New England, a friend was bitten this summer and had to go to a doctor in California to get medication because the doctors in Maine said, don't take anything until you're seeing symptoms, and that is the worst possible advice. If you get a tick bite, get on those meds immediately. It is hugely important, and doctors are dumbasses, and two, they're bought and paid for by insurance and pharma companies. Not all, but some. Trust me, I've been in their offices. This is like number 9, maybe. Numero 9. Any photog workshops for film shooters this summer that you'd recommend in the Southwest USA? The only place I would look at is Santa Fe Photo Workshops. I don't know if they're running film workshops. I haven't heard of that, but there probably is because film is pretty popular. And I'm sure there's individuals out there who are teaching workshops with film. I don't know. I don't really know. I'm sorry. That's not a lot of help on that one. Number 10, and then we're going to call it quits. Hello, Daniel. Only my mom and my sister call me Daniel. Whatever, doesn't matter. I had a question about photography projects. I have several long-term projects I'm working on documenting Kansas, where I live, in areas in Missouri, along with a list of future projects that could fill a notebook. You and me both, my friend. I've been thinking of approaching local businesses and local historical societies to see if I could get some sponsors to help with travel and weather-sealed camera to withstand some of the conditions I'll be photographing in. With all your years' experience, what could be pros and more important cons to this, or would it be better to just go along without anyone looking over my shoulder? Any input would be helpful. I would always go by myself if I could. If I had an option of getting a sponsorship from a historical society or local business, vast majority of these people at local historical societies and businesses do not understand photography at all. They don't understand what it takes to do it. And a lot of times 1 ounce of power translates into, I want my fingerprints on all of this. I turn down every assignment that comes my way. I don't ever want to pick up a camera again for someone else because there's always the strings attached. Even with the best clients, you're always under the umbrella of what it is that they need or don't need or can have or can't have. You know, it's like working at a newspaper. Every newspaper has editorial guidelines, and depending if you're working for a liberal paper or a conservative paper, those are going to vary dramatically. The papers, one of the main papers I worked for was a conservative paper, which was odd because a lot of papers in the country were more left-leaning, and this was very much a right-leaning paper. Huge paper, big budgets. I knew there was a select set of style of imagery they would not run. No matter how important it was for the community to know it, it impacted ad sales. And the executives, who are all a bunch of wealthy white guys, would sit around and say, we're not running that because we're going to run golf advertising. And the golf course doesn't want to see like what's actually happening in the city. They just want tourists to come here and play golf. So I think if I could do it on my own, I would always do it on my own. That way you can work at your own pace and your own style, and you're fine. And in terms of a weatherproof camera or weather sealed camera, just get an umbrella. Seriously, that's it. I use an umbrella. I jam it in my coat. Umbrella's up above me, doesn't matter. You don't need anything. You can also put your camera in a Ziploc bag, cut a hole in the end, pull the lens through, and just use that. And that way you don't have to buy anything new. You just use a Ziploc or an umbrella. It works great. And I would always go solo. The days of where I thought, I wanted to be on assignment all the time, that died for me a long time ago. However, I know tons of people who work all the time on assignment and they love it. They found a balance. It works for them. The historical society here, we call the hysterical society because they do a lot of crazy things and there's a lot of favoritism. And if you know so-and-so, you can get something done. And if you don't know that person or you don't have that relationship, you're never going to get it done. So there's politics and bureaucracy. And I want to be free, people. Free like an eagle. Free bird. 17-minute Leonard Skinner, free bird. Should be mandatory instead of the national anthem in elementary schools. You have to stand up and say the Pledge of Allegiance. Do you Eurotrash out there? Do you know what happens in American school system? Public school, when you're in elementary school, I don't know if they're still doing this. You had to stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance every day at the beginning of the school day. My bid, my pitch, my idea, replace that with the 17-minute version of Freebird, because those kids are going to be jacked for learning after that song comes on. That's it, people. That's all we have for this film. We're at 40 minutes. That's a good, healthy, red-blooded 40 minutes of pure entertainment. I appreciate it. And sorry for another Q&A film, but I got me some things to do. Ciao.